guys, Samantha from Jessama Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you how to use UV resin. So you have two choices when it comes to UV resin. You have the one that is going to form a dome, such as Lisa Pavelka's Magic Gloss, or you have the one that can be used almost like a gloss varnish that self-levels with no brush strokes, such as this one, or Teresa Pandora's Deep Shine. So an example of those are here. So here is basically what the Magic Gloss will do. You can see here it's just basically the same as a two-part resin such as ice resin, but you cure it in a UV lamp rather than having to wait 24 hours for it to dry. And then down here I used UV resin because it is not a flat surface. The UV resin is really nice because it doesn't drip all over the place. So a good example of something that was done with UV resin is this ring that I have, which is a very three-dimensional piece that normal resin would have quite a bit of trouble sticking to without drips. So that's the nice thing about the UV resin. So we are going to work with the Magic Gloss first. And now the nice thing with resin is you don't have to worry about sanding your pieces first. So here are two pieces that have come out of the oven, and they were burnished before putting in the oven, but you can see it, they don't have a sanded finish to them. Now with Lisa Pavelka's Magic Gloss or any resin that is a doming resin, you're not going to be able to do things with it. You're not going to be able to resin beads with it, such as this. You will want to leave that to a brushable UV resin, such as this. So the way you'll use this is you will take a resin mat, preferably a silicone one, because if the resin drips you'll be able to work it out of the silicone mat very easily. You'll position your project, and you want your project to be flat, as I've said before, and just grab some of your resin and just pour it onto the surface. And I just want you to see the difference there between the resin parts and the non-resin parts. It really brings out the colour a lot, makes it a lot more vibrant. And also with the pearly clay, the metallic clay, you can see that it's brought out that sparkle quite a bit. So then you will drag that to the edges of your piece. And now the Magic Gloss that I'm using does drag away from the edges quite a bit, so you might need to add more resin because it really likes to create quite a nice heavy dome, which is really nice, but it means that it can be a little frustrating if you don't put enough resin on, because it will just drag away from the edges. Another doming UV resin you can use is Ultra Dome. It's quite a bit harder to get hold of, but that one doesn't pull away from the edges. And you can just see how beautiful and dark that's made the black just by putting the resin on. This is why I'm saying you don't have to worry about sanding unless you've got an imperfection on the clay, because basically you won't see normal problems with the clay when you put resin on it. Okay, just stretch that all the way to the edges. And it basically works the same way as a normal resin, except that you can just cure it a lot faster by putting it in the UV lamp. So then you'll go and take that and you'll put that in the UV lamp for about 15 minutes to cure. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the brushable UV resin, which is this one. And we're just going to open that up, and I've got some more test chips which again don't need to be sanded. And I will also show you how to do a three-dimensional object such as this round bead. So first what you're going to do is you're just going to take that UV resin, just pour a little bit onto the surface of your clay. And again you can see it has the same effect as that Lisa Pavelka resin. And I am going to attempt to use this because once you get resin in a brush, it's quite a problem unless you clean it thoroughly. So I prefer to try and get this across the surface of my clay with a disposable wooden skewer rather than a brush, because I don't like using resin with brushes, but you can use a brush. And you can see there it doesn't really create a dome, but it does brush really nicely across the surface of your clay. And so I said in a previous video with gloss varnish that I prefer to use this resin instead of gloss varnish simply because it does not create brush strokes. And you can see it does not create brush strokes, and it actually finishes off the clay quite a bit better. So if you can get hold of this, I would recommend this over a gloss varnish. And also it dries quicker than a gloss varnish as well. Okay, and there we are. You can see that spreads across really nicely and it does not pull away from the edges. There we are. Okay, and then as for, let me just move these over here out of the way. As for the bead, what you're going to do is you're just going to pop it onto a piece of wire like this and onto a suspended object such as this bowl. It's just refusing to stay there, but it will stay. And then you're going to need to use a brush, so I'm going to just grab this brush here and just pop some of that UV resin on. And then just brush that across the surface of your bead. And it will self-level. Okay, and I might give it a little bit more. And you want to give it a chance to self-level before putting it in the UV lamp, because this basically hardens the instant you put it under UV light. And you can cure it out in the sunlight as well, but the UV lamp is definitely quicker. There we are. So I'll give that a little while to self-level, and then I'll put it in the UV lamp as well. Okay, so our stuff has been in the UV light for about 10 minutes. So I just want to bring that out. So this one here, it will have set on the wire. And now with the brushable UV resin, I typically like to take it out of the UV lamp and then I will let it sit for about an hour or so, because after it's come out of the UV lamp, generally it will have a slight stickiness to it. I'm not sure why, but it goes away after about an hour. So just grab that off of your wire, and then I like to just let that sit off to the side for roughly an hour, just to get rid of that stickiness. And here are the other ones. So this is the brushable one. You can see that it gives a really nice finish. It is completely hard to the touch, but I just want to press on it lightly, and you can see it takes fingerprints still, so you need to be careful with it. You can brush that away for the most part, but I would advise leaving these for about an hour before messing with them, because as I said, they have this residue on them. Okay, and then as for the magic gloss, this takes a little bit longer to cure, but it gives a really nice dome, as you can see. And now this one, I left the air bubbles in just to show you this. It will cure with the air bubbles, so if you are using this resin, you need to make sure that you get rid of the air bubbles before you cure it, because the curing process will not get rid of the air bubbles. And you can see that with pretty much all of the resin that we put on there, that it hasn't dragged away from the edges much. This one, it has dragged away. If that happens, you can always give it a second coat. But if you put enough resin on, like with this one, you shouldn't have to do that. So that's basically how I use UV resin. It can be used in many different ways, as I showed you in the example, such as this one where I used the normal Lisa Pavelko Magic Gloss on here, where it gives a really nice dome but cannot be used on a three-dimensional piece. And then I used the brushable UV resin on these little honey drips, I guess, to give it a nice shiny finish. And you can also use the brushable UV resin to do things such as rings and other dimensional things. So I do hope that this was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.